Hi, this is Dr. Georgia. I hope you find today's message a blessing in your life. We want to make sure that we continue to provide these video messages for you when you can't come to church, or for those of you who live in a different state, or we noticed recently we have a lot of people in even different countries who are tuning in. So if that is you and you can donate to us, we invite you to hit that donate button just below the message here. So thanks so much. Principles. Let's get ready. You put your hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now if you just put your hand over your heart, extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with is that conditions have no power over me.
Amen.
Conditions have no power. People have no power over me. Places have no power over me. Situations have no power over me. Unless, of course, I give them the permission to have power over me. See, it's important for us now, as we begin our work as metaphysicians, to understand that we have to take our permission back from the economy to have power over us. We have to take our permission back from cable news to have power over us. We have to take our permission back from our in-laws to have power over us. We have to take our permission back from our bodies to have power over, from our jobs to have power over us. Now, it doesn't mean, I don't want you to go to work Monday and say, my minister said to my boss, you have no power over me. That's not what it means. We all have to do things that we don't want to do at work. We do. We just do. But what it does mean is that conditions, people, places, and things don't have the power to make us feel or think that we are less than in any way. Because you are not less than. You cannot be less than. You cannot be less than, because you are a representation of the presence of God on this planet. You are God in form. Jesus told us that. Are ye not gods? Now, we know, you and I know, we are not all of God. But God is all of us. And if we could begin to work with that in our consciousness, that we walk and talk as God. Not as the God of our childhood, perhaps, who was sometimey or punished other people. No, not that God. The God of love, the God of abundance, the God of prosperity, the God of hope. If we could begin to live and walk in that way. See, if you lost your house to foreclosure, or you went through bankruptcy, you are not less than. Those are conditions, and conditions are simply signposts. They're simply transient signposts to tell you that course correction needs to be made, to tell you that you need to get clearer sooner about spiritual principles. That's all those are. They're transient. You are eternal beings with all of the power that God has inside of you. Well, we're spending time getting ready for summer, spending time learning how to stop allowing conditions to define us and allowing ourselves to begin to define and determine our conditions in our life. But I want to say this. In order to do that, in order to be able to begin to affect our conditions, and we can do that, every single person in this room can right now learn how to affect a condition in their life that's making them feel any part of less than. You can do that right this second. But in order to do that, you have to leave the comfortable land of limitation. And you have to step into the scary land of pure potentiality. That land that we are not as used to in our life. And we're working right now with a book that tells us there is absolutely no excuse for playing small. None. It's a book called The Big Leap. by Gay Hendricks. Some of you have this book. Some of you have read this book. Some of you have even heard me talk about this book in the past. If you haven't got it, get on Amazon right now, today. It's chock full of stories. It's chock full of information about how we can take the big leap into the land of pure potentiality and leave the land of comfort. It's a great book, and if you do that, make sure you go on Smile so we get a little portion. We don't sell books here anymore, so get on Smile and order this book up for you. His premise is this: every single one of us have an upper limit to our success. We go so far, and then we bump up into an upper limit that we have created for ourselves. We have a thermostatic setting, and if we go higher than our thermostatic setting is set, we will make ourselves, we'll sabotage ourselves back into a lower thermostatic setting, a lower set of success in this life. He says this, he says, you can have happiness in all areas of your life. And that's important because some of us do really well in our relationships, but not so well in finances. Or really well in our health goals, but not so well in other things. What he says is, let's get it so that you can have success in all of those areas. But you have to, and we talked about this last week. If you didn't hear this last week, you want to get online and go to our website and hear about these zones, because he's asked us to leave these certain zones. Leave the zone of incompetence. Leave the zone of incompetence. That area where you don't do very well and you keep struggling to do better. Leave that zone. Leave the zone of competence where you do pretty well, but others do just as well. Leave that zone too. In fact, even leave the zone of excellence. Get out of your zone of excellence. And that's harder to do because you're comfortable there. And other people like you there because you bring home the money, and your company likes you because you're good at it. Leave that zone of excellence. Move into your zone of genius. And that's where you will find your happiness in your life. He says this: the upper limit problem is held together by 4 hidden barrier beliefs. 4 hidden barrier beliefs. Those barrier beliefs were all started when we were young kids, for the most part. They were started by young kids before we could kind of like say, well, that doesn't really make sense to ourselves. Somebody telling you you're not very pretty all the time, and you're a little kid, you don't know what pretty is, so you kind of bring it in, and you internalize it, and you allow it to get, it's a false belief based on fear, somebody else's fear. And it's a false belief. Here's what he says. He says, every person I've worked with has uncovered at least one of the barriers, and sometimes 2 or 3. I've never met anybody who had all 4. He hasn't met me yet. The 4 hidden barriers all have something in common. Although they seem true and real, they are based on beliefs about ourselves that are neither true or real. The fact that we unconsciously take them on as true and real is the barrier that is holding us back. We take them on as true, when we take them on as true and real until we shine an awareness on them. So the good news is, I'm going to talk about these 4 hidden barriers today, but I want you to remember that part, that there is a solution to them. And the solution to the 4 hidden barriers is awareness. It's shining light on it. That's why we call this church the Center for Spiritual Awareness. Because once we become aware of these things, they tend to work out themselves. So let's get started. The first one is the hidden barrier belief of feeling fundamentally flawed. Fundamentally flawed. A lot of us are walking around thinking that there is something wrong with us, and sometimes we can't even exactly figure out what it is, but we feel like there's something wrong with us. Here's an example, and I love this book because he tells a lot of stories, and I learn by stories, and I know some of you do too. He said, he's talking about one of his clients. He started out his life as the first child of a powerful executive who would go on to run 2 different Fortune 500 companies. When my client was just out of diapers, though, his parents split up and got into an epic battle over money, a conflict that went on for years. His father remarried and started another family, so Carl's early life was spent shuttling back and forth between those hostile forces. Later, in a moment of alcohol-induced candor, his father confessed to Carl that he could never look at him without simultaneously feeling hatred for his mother. The father had convicted Carl of the crime Carl couldn't understand or name. All he knew was that his father looked at him differently than his younger half-brother. Carl unconsciously convicted himself of the crime too. Years later, he would tell me, "I figured if he looked at me that way, I must have done something wrong. But I could never get anybody to tell me exactly what it was that I have done wrong." Now, the answer to Carl and all of us who might feel some area of fundamental flaw is not to go back and blame anybody. It's to shed light on the possibility that this could be a hidden belief barrier that's turning your thermostat down on your success. The second one is the hidden belief barrier of disloyalty and abandonment. Now, there are 2 questions that he poses that can help us understand whether we have this particular hidden belief barrier of disloyalty and abandonment. The first question is this: did I break tribal and family unspoken or spoken rules? Did I break a rule by my family or my tribe that is unspoken or spoken to get where I am today? That's a powerful question. I began to answer myself that. And there were the obvious ones, you know. When my mother was pregnant, I'm sure they didn't sit around the kitchen table and say, "Oh, I hope she turns out to be a lesbian. I hope she turns out to be a..." I'm pretty sure that's a broken rule that I broke. But there's a different one. You know, I grew up Catholic. And I grew up very, very Catholic. And there is a belief among, it's changing gratefully, but there's a belief among many of the Catholic faithful that there's only one true church, and it's the Catholic Church. My family held that belief, so that when it came time for me to fulfill my dream job, fulfill what I felt was my zone of genius, which is being your minister, I had to break a family rule. I had to break a family rule in order to leave the Catholic Church and come and do what I wanted to do. Now, the truth is, I have to just look at this. Is it possible that I've lowered my thermostatic setting on success in my ministry because of this hidden barrier belief? Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I'm still working on it. There's no absolute quick aha to many of these, but we're asking ourselves the question, did I break an unspoken rule or a spoken rule with my family or my tribe? The truth is, in the American culture, when I started ministry, women in ministry was a little different. It was different than the spoken and unspoken rule of the tribe. So I get to ask myself, is there a hidden belief that I have here? That I'm being disloyal to my tribe? Am I being disloyal to my family and bringing down my thermostatic setting? The second question that we can ask ourselves is, even though I'm successful, did I fail to meet an expectation of my parents? Now, my brother was a poli-sci teacher in high school, and it was his zone of genius. The material enlivened him, and he enlivened his students. But my parents were always pushing him to go back to school and get a master's degree in administration so that he could become a principal, because they didn't really believe that men should be teachers. So in order to meet their expectations, this man who's in his zone of genius and creating great good in the world goes back to school, gets his master's degree in school administration, becomes a principal, and goes back to his zone of excellence. Now, he was a great public school high school principal. He put all his all into that work, but he was not in his zone of genius, and it began to wear on him, and wear on him, and wear on him, until finally he went back into the classroom, much to my mother's upset. My mother could no longer say, my son is the principal. And this was in a relatively small town, so it was a bigger, prestigious deal. But he knew that he had this zone of genius, and he was able to beat this particular hidden barrier of disloyalty and abandonment. The third one is believing that more success brings a bigger burden. More success brings a bigger burden. You know, I know a lot of us in this room have believed that we came unexpectedly into the world and we created a burden for our parents, either financially or with time, or perhaps if you were adopted, you are under the impression that you are a burden just even visibly for being around. See, what happens when we have this particular barrier in our life, we begin to automatically turn down the thermostat and stay out of our zone of genius. He tells a story about a man who his parents had one son, and the son was about 6 months old, and she got pregnant again, and the father leaves during the pregnancy, and the mother had to work 2 and 3 jobs to keep the 2 boys now together, and he always felt like he was an imposition. He always felt like he was a burden to their success because he was more. And so he tells a story one day when he was a grown man, he wrote a book, a very successful book, and he decided to have a coffee date with his mom and his brother, and he went to the coffee date, and he had a book brand new, just out off the presses, and he put one down. They were in a conversation, and he didn't want to interrupt the conversation, so he just put the book down on the table and began to listen to their conversation. They stopped eventually, each picked up the book, looked at it, didn't open it, didn't say a word, put down the book, and went back to their conversation without any saying. So he realized after working with Gay Hendricks that he was under the impression, the false belief, the hidden false belief that he was a burden. Once we feel like we're a burden, we begin to put down the thermos. See, because successful people, they're visible. Successful people are visible. And when you're not successful, you kind of keep it quiet. You turn down the thermostat. And that leads me to the last one. The last one, and the last hidden barrier belief, is the crime of outshining. The crime of outshining. Now remember, these are all hidden beliefs. They're false beliefs. And they're often planted when we're younger people. And because they're planted when we're younger people, this thing of outshining often gets hooked up with our siblings. And so parents don't want one child to feel like they're shining brighter than another child, and so oftentimes we'll tone it down, just we'll bring it in so that we are pleasing our parents and we're not outshining another child. Or sometimes what happens is our parents may go overboard in praising one child, but that child looks over and sees their sibling in pain, and so they naturally, out of compassion, because we're all compassionate naturally beings, they bring it in, they begin to tone it down in their life. He talks about a story about a man, very successful businessman, who just couldn't keep going. He was stuck at a very successful rate, but he was stuck. So he went to Gay Hendricks and he said, I don't know, I want to take a big leap, but I can't take the big leap. I've got an upper limit problem and I can't seem to break through it. And so they began to work with this idea of outshining. And he said, you know, when this guy was a child, or young child, he was a piano prodigy. And he had a younger sister, a couple years younger than him, who was also very musically endowed. And so, unfortunately, the younger sister dies of leukemia. And of course, the family is devastated, but they all get through it. And the boy turns 14, and the family buys him a baby grand piano. And he's so excited because he's been taking a bus across town to a cousin's house to practice every single day. Now this kid's a prodigy. He knows he's a prodigy. Everybody knows he's a prodigy. He's happy to practice, but he has to go across town. So when they buy the piano, they put it in the room at night, they bring him the next day into the room and to show him the piano, and he's ecstatic. He's so excited. He sits down and he begins to play, and his mother says, "You know, if your sister were still alive, we'd never be able to afford this." Now, before we judge the mother, you know, we don't know what it's like to lose a child. We don't know what stupid stuff comes out of our mouth. Okay. But what that did for him, he could no longer play the piano because he didn't want to outshine this child. He went into business. When they found that upper limit hidden belief, they were able to correct it with some light on it, and he is now a even more successful businessman. See, you and I, we can't outshine anybody. We can't, because God is present in each and every one of us. What we can do is begin to encourage other people to shine. Jesus in Matthew 5, he says, "Let your light shine. Don't hide it under a bushel. Let it shine out." So let's begin this summer by taking big leaps. We're going to continue on for another week or two on this because I think it's valuable. You think it's valuable information? Yeah. But here's the thing. I want you to get the book or get online and write down those 4 things and begin to think about them and work with them. Because if you just come here on Sunday to be inspired and entertained, you'll move, you'll shift, but not like you could. Let's take this message into prayer. There's only one power. It's the power of love, and it runs right through me. And so I simply open up. That's my job. My job is simply to open up. It's not to create anything. It's simply to allow that which is inside of me to come forth. Knowing that it is compassion and love, I give thanks for it. I release this word into God together.